How about now? Can you hear me now? Okay, I think you can probably hear me now. Okay, so I'm going to start over since you guys couldn't hear me at the beginning. Um, I am Jodi Carlton, and I'm a neurodiversity expert. Okay, can you guys hear me now? Somebody give me a thumbs up that you can hear me. And I'm going to wait till I hear you guys tell me that you can hear me. Yep, okay, good. You can hear me. Thank you, Mike. Okay, so I'm going to start over. If you're new here, welcome. And what the reason you couldn't hear me was I was trying to tell you guys that I'm streaming to 3 platforms today, and so I thought I might run into some tech issues. So I'm streaming to YouTube here, and I'm also streaming to my Facebook page and my Facebook group. So yeah. Okay, thanks, Bonnie. All right. So those of you who are new here, I'm Jodi Carlton, and I'm a neurodiversity expert. And I'm using that word right now or more because it seems to resonate more with a lot of you. So neurodiverse means that your brain works a little differently than everybody else. And so we basically this includes autism, what we used to call Asperger's. But I have been working with folks on the spectrum for over 15 years. And I just dropped the link to my LinkedIn profile, which has my full resume on there, to let you know about my degrees and my licensure and my history. So if anybody's interested in that, that is there. Hi, Emily, Barbara. I've got folks on my Facebook page, and good, you guys are here. Cool. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is if you see, when you see this, let's see, where did it go? When you see this pop up, we're gonna start the Q&A. But go ahead and start dropping me your questions on whichever platform you're on, and I'm going to take a look at all of these just to try to keep up. So, but I wanted to make a couple of announcements. Thursday, the third Thursday of every week, I actually do group coaching on Zoom with my private members. This is different than the live stream, like where I'm talking to you, but this is where you can get on a call with me and talk to me with other members on the call. And so I'm opening this up this month to people who don't have a membership with me. Membership is $45 a month, you guys, and it includes the Spectrum Straight Talk library of videos, like 100 videos of tips from me. But I'm letting you in without a membership, which is monthly. And so if you want to get on that Zoom call, here's the link. I have a Facebook event set up. And some of you are already members, so you're automatically going to be sent out instructions on how to join that Zoom call. But here it is for those of you who might be interested in just joining this time. And I'm giving you the option to join for the same rate as the membership, but you only have to pay this one time and see what you think. So there's that announcement. And the other thing that I wanted to tell you guys before we start the Q&A, I opened up my calendar in May to do autism screening evaluations, and every single one of those appointments booked out. And it was a really fantastic experience for me and for those of you who booked with me. And basically what I will do in this 90-minute evaluation, you will complete an autism screening assessment, and then I'll go over it with you, go over your results, and we'll talk about your background, your history, your results, and we'll get you to some definitive clarity on whether or not you're on the spectrum. So if that's you or your partner, I have these evaluations available. Again, I've added some more to my calendar for the rest of June and July. And the other option for evaluation includes an autism screening, but also a comprehensive relationship evaluation. And I've already got somebody who's booking in for that as soon as I open that up. And this is a 2-hour evaluation, which includes the autism screening, but also I will have each of you do a formal assessment online. It's an interview assessment that you complete online, and it will give me really, really in-depth insight into your relationship and I'll be looking at it through the lens of someone who understands neurodiversity. And so we will go over your autism screening results, but also this relationship evaluation, and just to figure out what's tripping you guys up and then we'll talk together about a game plan about what will help you to improve your relationship. And we want to decrease and minimize the conflict and improve the connection between the two of you, improve the communication. Okay, I'm looking over here to see if anybody's dropping me comments over here on my Facebook group. And hi, Nathan. Hi, Clara. Good to see you guys. Okay, let's start Q&A. So, what have you guys got to ask me today? Now, I did have a question from a member of my Facebook group, and so I can start with her question, but I want you guys to start dropping me your own questions here so that I can answer any questions that you guys have today. Let's see, I think I said hi to you, Barbara. Okay, so one of my members in my private Facebook group said, okay, hi, Wendy, oh, you put your question on Facebook. Okay, I did not see that before I went live, so if you can drop it here, I'll go ahead and answer that question here. So one of my other members in my private Facebook group asked me, now she is a member who really highly suspects she's on the spectrum. She's in the process of getting formal evaluation in her country. And by the way, I work with folks around the world, you guys. So I have had clients on like 5 continents. So wherever you are, we will figure it out. But she asked me, how can my husband communicate with me in a way that I don't have a meltdown or a blow up? So my answer to that is, first of all, we can never control how someone else interacts with us. We can make requests, but we can't ever control how they interact with us. The only thing we can actually control is ourselves and how we respond or react to other people. So there are two parts to the answer that I have for you. One is to start basically figuring out how you can manage yourself when you feel frustrated. We all have to learn at some level how to regulate our emotions. And so those of you on the spectrum sometimes struggle with this more than those who are neurotypical. A trigger can be flipped, sensory overload can happen, and sometimes neurotypical folks struggle with this too. So this is advice for everybody. So start thinking about what are some things that you have done in the past that can help you to not react in a way that's a blow up. So what some of my clients, what I recommend to folks is to take a pause, step back. Something that we all have a tendency to want to do is to engage. And if our fight or flight response kicks in based on something that a partner has said to us, we go into fight mode, or sometimes flight mode, which we take off and hide, and we disengage. But in this case, a pause is really, really helpful. A pause, even telling your partner or your husband, I need time to process this, or if you can't even articulate it, because sometimes in the middle of that overwhelm, it's hard to even bring words to this, to be able to articulate. You can use a hand signal and say, tell your husband in advance. If you go like this, or whatever hand signal that you agree on, when you do that, it lets him know, okay, I need to pause. I need to take a minute to process. If your partner keeps pursuing you, your husband keeps pursuing you, it's okay to leave. Sometimes we can't leave, you guys. If you're in the car, you can't leave. But leave the space. Go do something that calms and regulates your sensory system. So the second part of that is to regulate your sensory system. There are a few things you can do that will literally regulate your sensory system at the brain level. And one of those things is deep pressure to the joints. Okay, these are your joints. Anywhere your bones connect, those are joints. It regulates our body to have deep pressure. Temple Grandin discovered this, who is a really famous autistic individual who's a professor at the University of Denver in Colorado. She invented this squeeze machine because she works with the cattle industry, and she noticed how the cows would really calm down when they were in this squeeze machine to get vaccinations. So she invented this machine for herself. With my daughter, who's on the spectrum, we will like steamroll her with a pillow. When she was younger, she's 18 now. Sometimes now she'll ask for a deep pressure hug. She can't look at me when she's doing that deep pressure hug. That's our what we call the Aspie hug. Um, but any kind of like I wall push-ups, you can do push-ups on the floor if you're a guy and you have that upper body strength, or if you're a girl and have that upper body strength, you can do push-ups against the wall. Another thing that's really regulating to the sensory system is crossing the midline. So what that means is when you take your extremities from one side of your body to the other side of the body. This crosses the midline of your body, and it actually helps the sides of your brain regulate themselves, and it calms the sensory system. It's very calming. So twisting motions, um, if you even do some exercises where you're twisting, those can help regulate your sensory system. So these are just some examples of what you can do anytime you're feeling like you're having a sensory meltdown or overload, not just when your partner says something that triggers you. For all of you who are on the spectrum, these are some tips. But okay, the second part of that question, though, and this was for Emily, is you can tell your husband what types of things are, what types of behavior, questions, comments are likely to be triggers for you. This goes for both partners, you guys. Have a conversation about what triggers you. Use my battle buster system. I used to call this my 2 or 10. Those of you who've been with me for a while know this as the 2 or 10 system. But I call it my battle buster system now. And you can download it for free on the website. Just go to spectrumrelationships.com. It helps you figure out what conversations are worth pursuing and which ones are not. Okay, I have somebody saying that they can't hear me on the Facebook platform, but I don't know how to fix that right now. So I'm just going to keep talking to you guys on YouTube. All right, now I see some questions here. Okay, Wendy says, how can we have meltdowns safely without blowing up at the children or each other? Okay, this kind of is similar. This is a meltdown question. So meltdowns, just so you know, guys, are something that we all do, not just folks on the spectrum. I'm neurotypical, and I have had a meltdown before. Safety. You use the word safety. Basically, we have to look at how we define the word safe. Because there's one thing, there's physical safety, is there harm, to life or limb? And the other is emotional and verbal safety. And that is a much more abstract term. And some people feel that any kind of yelling or getting upset by a parent or even yelling at a child is unsafe for the child. Guys, my nose itches every time I go live. I don't know why. So a lot of people think that if I raise my voice, if I yell, if I just lose it to my kids, that's not safe for them. And so I'd really encourage you to stop and think about what happens in life. Do adults, are we exposed to other people yelling at us at times, whether it's our partner, our friend, our boss, the guy who got mad at us for cutting him off in traffic? People yell at us sometimes. And our job as parents is to teach our kids how to handle it when these situations happen. So if you're concerned, well, first of all, if your meltdowns are risking your child's life or they're in physical danger, then it's important to remove yourself. Or if you are their caregiver in that moment in time, call in reinforcement, get someone to come in and help you. If you are it, then you've got to use some of these other strategies that I just described about regulating your sensory system. But if this is an emotional verbal outburst, now we need to, again, look at what degree of yelling? Are you calling them names? Are you cursing at them? That is when we have to take responsibility for ourselves. First of all, any meltdown does not give us um, nobody. I've never met anybody who can't at some level control what they say and do in a meltdown. And I know this because a lot of folks unleash on their partners or their kids, but when they're at work, they don't. Or if they're in a public setting at church or other community gatherings, they're able to get angry without cursing at someone. So we really can control what we do and say. Most people, if you are high functioning enough to be in a relationship, then you can control yourself to a degree. Um, so it's our responsibility not to say certain really hurtful, horrible things to our kids that are calling them names or cursing them. But it's okay to kind of lose it to our kids. That's okay. And then later we can say, I lost it. We are also teaching our children at that point how to take responsibility for our actions. This is not putting them into an unsafe space because we lost it on them. We're actually teaching them, hey, it's human to lose it sometimes. And this is what you do when it happens. Okay, so I hope that was helpful. I don't know if my folks over here on Facebook can hear me. Okay, let's talk about it is here. Okay, you're saying, is there anything special a neurotypical standing spouse should do with a partner who's on the spectrum and having an affair? I'm involved in a marriage saving group, but it seems the partners are always in T. Okay, so you're saying, I think, that the autistic partner, the neurodiverse partner, is the one having an affair? No, you're saying the partner is the one, the neurotypical person is the one having an affair. You know what? It doesn't even matter. Affairs are a problem. And typically, it doesn't really matter if it's neurotypical or neurodiverse. When there's an affair, our society here in the US especially tends to villainize people who have affairs. But here's the thing, you guys. Affairs are a symptom of a problem. Affairs aren't usually the problem unless unless someone is a toxic personality who really does not care at all about their partner. They care about themselves more. They care about what they want. And they don't care if their partner is harmed or hurt. And some people actually get kicks out of this. They feel powerful when their partner is harmed. So if you're dealing with two people, that's a totally different issue if someone's toxic like that. But if you're dealing with partners where both of them do genuinely care about the other person, they may be in an antagonistic space and really, really struggling to like each other, but they still genuinely don't want the other person to be harmed. That is a symptom of a problem in the relationship. And so what needs to happen, this is a really disconnected relationship. When someone goes outside of it to have an emotional affair or an actual affair, this is a seeking. We're seeking something from outside of our relationship. So what has to happen is a reconnection in the relationship. And that usually starts with communication. In neurodiverse relationships, communication breakdown is huge because neurotypical and neurodiverse partners don't know how to talk to each other in a way that they understand each other. So it's really imperative to figure out those communication skills. I have a communication curriculum, you guys. There's a self-study course. The coaching group for that program starts. I'm an opening enrollment in a couple, probably next week. So that program has been just life-altering for a lot of relationships on the spectrum because that communication is critical. Thank you for that question. Let's see. All right, I've got Nedra. You're welcome, Emily. Nedra is asking me from my Facebook group, how do you know if your Aspie loves you if he doesn't tell you? Oh, I have a video about this on YouTube. I will have my VA, or I will drop the link to it. It's got, I don't even know how many thousands of views at this point. And it's literally called How to Know If Someone with Asperger's Loves You. And there are lots and lots of ways to tell that someone with Asperger's loves you, but I actually break it down into, I think, 5 things, just five of those ways to know that someone on the spectrum loves you, because words, language is not typically the way that neurodiverse folks communicate love. I've had neurodiverse clients, lots and lots of people, tell me that saying "I love you" seems awkward, and it just doesn't feel right. Or maybe they say "I love you" once and then assume, okay, I've told you, you know it. It doesn't make sense for me to keep telling you. So it is important to look at those other ways. A lot of times it has to do with uh, that person wanting to spend time with you, your neurodiverse partner wanting to share in their special interests with you. I'm going to drop that link because I have a whole other. I don't want to spend this Q&A explaining that what that whole video goes into. All right, thank you for that question, though, Nidra. Okay, Mikey boy, hello. Um, you said I have an obsessive personality. I have strong interests in my hobbies and interests, but I also get quite obsessed over certain individuals, especially ones who have been good to me and ones who I've put a lot of time in to invest in, as it can be quite a lot of effort for me to talk to people individually. This also involves people who've been good to me, but I haven't even met them. For example, uh-oh, my thing jumped. Okay. You said, for example, YouTubers, and because of the obsession, I want to support them a lot via comments and donations. However, I get quite low if I don't get responses from them, as I put a lot of effort into getting to know them. Is it common for people with ASD to become obsessed with people? And if so, do you have tips to help in not becoming so obsessed that it gets me really low? Okay, that's a great question. What you're talking about is this obsession in neurodiversity is what we call perseveration. It's a big word, don't have to remember it. But it's basically when folks, we get locked into something that kind of, we get locked in on it, and we all do this to a degree. We can perseverate on anything. If we get a song stuck in our head, a jingle stuck in our head, an idea that we just can't let go of, it's called perseverating. Folks on the spectrum tend to, their brains get stuck on these things more than neurotypical brains. So I'm hearing that you really, really put a lot into these other YouTube folks, or people that, you know, people that really are you value in some way. But you're saying that it's disappointing to you when they don't respond back. So what you want to look at is, are they, some people, who is likely to respond to you? First of all, if you're investing a lot of time in this, in somebody who's like really hugely got a huge following, they're not going to be able to respond no matter how much you put into communicating with them, donating to them. If they're huge and they've got thousands of subscribers, there's just no way, it's not realistic for them to respond to you. So you can reframe it in your mind a bit to say, wow, it would be really like hitting the jackpot, winning the lottery, if this person did respond to me. But the chances are not likely. So what that means is what you tell yourself about a situation, the meaning that we give to something, is that really sets us up for what we expect. So whether it's a YouTuber or even a person that you have live interaction with, it's important to look at how realistic is it for that person to be really involved in responding to you. What is the nature of your interaction or your relationship? How do you know them? Do they actually know you personally? It's important to look at what's going on in their lives. So theory of mind or cognitive empathy is something that folks on the spectrum struggle with, which means a difficulty realizing that someone else's experience is different than our own. So how someone else is experiencing this interaction is different from how I'm experiencing this interaction. So you may be putting a lot into it, but someone else's experience may be really different. They may be receiving some of that. They may not even be aware of some of your comments, or they may have a lot of other things going on in their life, which doesn't mean that you're not important to them, but it just may mean that they don't have the time or the ability to interact with you as much as you're interacting with them. So take a look at the different variables about how, what's realistic about them interacting with you and their actual experience and ability to. Okay. I think I may be having tech issues on Facebook, but I'll check into that afterwards. All right. Let's talk about it. It says, sorry if that was confusing. My partner, who is on the spectrum, is having the affair. Okay, so you are the neurotypical partner. And yeah, so I think I answered that though. It really comes still back to communication and reconnection. An affair is a symptom of a problem. It's painful. So you're the person who you have a partner who's having an affair. It's so painful. I'm not minimizing that at all, but I also don't want to villainize your partner because there is a reason. There is always a reason why affairs happen. It can be anything from, like I said, a toxic personality to a difference in expectations about the relationship to a breakdown in communication in the relationship. So it's important to clarify what is it? Where is that breakdown happening? Because people who are in connected relationships don't have affairs. When we are connected to our partner, there's not a need for an affair. So you got to figure out what specifically is causing that disconnect. Nathan says, I think that's why boundaries are so important because of the emotional affair component. Yes, Nathan, and you were mentioning that in the Facebook group in a conversation that we were having there about affairs, and you made some really good points about boundaries there. You guys, our Facebook group, we have some great conversation there. Those of you who are watching from the Facebook group, just know that I haven't forgotten about you guys. I have been posting in there, but Facebook has throttled me back and is only showing about 10% of you my posts, which is really frustrating. So, but I'm still there. Okay, Mary. Hi, Mary. Good to see you. All right, your question is, are women with autism allowed to love and be loved? The weird woman wants to have a sweetheart like everybody else. I'm nearly 58 years old and have never had a boyfriend or even been on a date. So you're saying, I am noticing the word allowed. Are women with autism allowed to love and be loved? Yes, absolutely. Well, of course, we're all allowed to be loved, but I'm also hearing pain in what you're saying because you're saying you're 58, almost 58, and you've never had a boyfriend or even been on a date. And so I'm hearing that you want this. So the question is, what's getting in your way? And so those communication skills, the interaction skills, learning how long you're 58, so I'm guessing that you haven't known you were on the spectrum your whole life. Well, I could be wrong about that, but most people at your age weren't diagnosed until later, and so didn't really know and understand what was going on in terms of their difficulty connecting in a loving relationship. So it's important to spend some time studying the neurotypical folks to understand more about perhaps what you expect in a relationship and how that's different from what someone who's neurotypical would expect. Or maybe you may have tried dating someone on the spectrum. I don't know. But a lot of times it comes down to expectations and learning how to communicate about those expectations. Again, communication is so important. Learning how, all the 4 stages that are involved in a communication. Most people don't know what those 4 stages are. That's why I broke it down in the communication program. So, I would like to invite you, if you're not already, in the Facebook group to come over and ask, because we have neurotypical folks in there. We have other folks on the spectrum in there, and we have great conversations with questions just like yours. All right. Okay. Let me see. So let's talk about it. You're agreeing with Nathan. Mikey Boy says, also just to add to my question, I can think about it for hours during the day and night too. Yeah, that's the perseveration that I was talking about. That's the brain just getting stuck on it. So something else you might want to try is to intentionally change change what you're thinking about. And this is an intentional thing. This is something that you do. Okay, my live stream on the group ended for some reason. So intentionality means I'm aware that I'm thinking about this a lot, and I'm going to consciously think about something else. And it's unless we pay attention to it and say and decide to think about something else and to focus on something else, our brain will just keep on going and keep on going and keep on going. Hey, nice to see you again too. All right, 8888 is what I'm going to call you. What do you do when your ND partner doesn't want to get help to communicate? He claims he accepts that he has it. I'm not really sure he realizes how Asperger's affects not just him, but his family by extension. Okay, well, I'll just tell you what some has worked for some of my other folks is when you get help in learning how to communicate, we can't make anybody else do anything. We can't make anybody else be motivated to do anything. It's just, we can't. And we have to accept that we can't motivate anybody else. But when we start learning how to communicate in a different way, it changes the whole relationship in a way that is usually noticeable. So I've had quite a few neurotypical partners who have started working through the communication curriculum that I have, and it has been a game changer for most people to really learn about these different stages of communication. I can't remember if you're in the program already, um, but basically once my neurotypical partners start learning, it starts to show up. You start to show up differently in the relationship. You start to understand your interactions differently, and you start to interact with your partner differently. And I've had, I'm not even sure how to count how many neurotypical partners who have had their autistic partners go, this is different. This is different. And I see this is different and this is working better. What's this all about? And so then they're curious and want to know. And because the relationship starts to improve with just one of you. And then they want to get more involved, sometimes to join into the coaching group or to do the self-study course, or sometimes to go ahead, depending on what the motivation level is, to work with me in the 2-month intensive, or with Debbie King, my other coach. So it starts with us. The answer to that is it starts with ourselves. We cannot motivate another human being to do something. I wish I had a magic wand and a formula for you. All right. All right, I think, Nathan, you're talking to the other guy. Okay, Mary says, I was not diagnosed until I was 50. I'm in the victim of sexual abuse over the course of my first 23 years. It was seen as too weird and too smart. Okay, yeah, so it sounds like you have a traumatic history of abuse. And so that history also really laid the groundwork for what you were taught and what the messages were that you got about love and being in a relationship. And so there's a lot to unravel there, a lot to deprogram. So the other thing that I would recommend for you is to work with a trauma specialist. I know that trauma work works because I am trauma certified, and so I have a couple of different modalities that I've done, but I don't typically do trauma work anymore. Not unless I'm involved with someone in intensive coaching, and the trauma kind of comes out, and then I'll work with them there. But I know that hypnosis for trauma, it can be very, very helpful. And also a modality called EMDR is one. And then there's another one called accelerated resolution therapy. And I'm certified in the accelerated resolution and also hypnosis. And so anybody who has that trauma history needs to really help the brain reset at the brain level, because those messages that are there, the fight or flight response that is there, needs to be reset at the brain level. And I think I would highly recommend that for you, Mary, to look into finding a provider near you that is trauma informed. Different terms are used: trauma informed, trauma certified. Those are some of the words you want to look for. Okay, you guys, let's see if there's anybody over here on the Facebook group has a question. I knew it was going to be a long shot to go live on 3 platforms without my producer. So, you guys, I'm always up for a good adventure. All right, any other questions here and on YouTube about relationships, about autism? Okay, yeah, I did already tell you guys about the assessments. I'm kind of reloading here. Okay, Nathan saying thanks for the EMDR advice. Yes, so for fostering, that's something you really want to know about for sure, because a lot of foster kids are going to have some significant trauma. Play therapy is also good for kids. So find a certified or registered play therapist, Nathan, to help you with that. Do you think Cassandra syndrome also makes it harder for communication as well? Okay, that's a good question. Cassandra syndrome comes up somewhat regularly, and I have an opinion about Cassandra syndrome that's not quite the same as what some people have. For those of you who aren't familiar, Cassandra syndrome is a syndrome that was coined by a provider in the UK, Maxine Aston, and she's basically describing a type of reaction, a response, an emotional response to being in a relationship that is neurodiverse over a long period of time, and that it feels very traumatic, and because being in a neurodiverse relationship can seem crazy making. It can feel like we're being gaslighted, which means our reality is being distorted, and it can really have long-term effects. I'm not a fan, though, of the concept of Cassandra syndrome, mainly because I've seen it really disable partners and get them stuck in a victim type of mindset of this has happened to me, this is happening to me. And yes, it is, but we also have so much power and control to change our relationships. And Cassandra, a lot of the Cassandra groups and what's out there about Cassandra is very much about what's happened to me, how I've been harmed, and we absolutely do need to acknowledge what has happened to us and what's influenced getting where we are now. But Cassandra groups really kind of foster the idea that that folks on the spectrum are it's more of a villain type mentality. And I'm not saying that that's how you're referring to it, but I prefer to look at both. When we're in a relationship, I prefer to look at both partners and what each partner is bringing to it, which includes confusion. That's not what we're bringing to it. It includes how we interact as a neurotypical or a neurodiverse brain, what other types of background and history we're bringing to it, like Mary was just referring to a trauma history. A lot of neurotypical partners have trauma histories as well, or codependency challenges where they're really the partners struggle to know how to have boundaries or how to care for self, and there's just a lot that we each bring to it. And so it's important to look at the relationship from what's happening on both sides. Now, I'm not referring to toxic, abusive relationships where someone is intentionally harming their partner. I will say most folks who are autistic or neurodiverse don't intentionally harm their partner. There's a lot of unintentional harm. The thing is there's a lot of unintentional harm done to autistic partners as well that those of us who are neurotypical don't mean. So my opinion about Cassandra may not be popular with everybody, but I'm just basing that on many years of working with folks on the spectrum and partners on the spectrum. Okay, so yeah, so you feel like you fit the profile for Cassandra, and I get. Well, I don't know for sure what you mean by that, but just know that anybody who's been in a relationship that's neurodiverse is going to feel somewhat traumatized in some way, and so it's okay to know that you fit that profile. But then instead of concentrating on how that harm has happened, I really encourage folks to feel empowered in terms of how to fix things for their life and in their relationship. So that's the main thing is Cassandra groups a lot of times are disempowering more than they are empowering. And so that's just my biggest concern. Hi, Glenn. Glenn says, I was attracted an attraction with an autistic woman on Facebook who was from New York. I'm from the state of Washington. Is it possible to date a woman who lives far away? Okay, I don't recommend it. I don't recommend it for neurotypicals. I don't recommend it for neurodiverse folks. It is next to, some of you may say, oh, I've done it, but it is very, very hard, if not impossible, to get to know the true person from long distance. Even if you live an hour away and you're just traveling to see them on the weekends, it's really, really, really hard because people don't act themselves, not necessarily intentionally. It's not about intentional deception. But the other piece of that is that we tend to fill in the gaps with what we don't know. So if we meet someone who lives far away and it's long distance, then we get bits and pieces of information about them through our conversations and our texts, our messages, our Facebook Live, or our FaceTimes. But then we fill in the gap by filling in what we are, based on that little bit of information, we fill in what we think about this person without even realizing it. It's subconscious. And then you meet them in person, and sometimes they don't even really look like what you thought. They don't sound like what you thought. Their real personality is not what you thought. It's just very, very risky. I just don't recommend it to anybody, honestly. Mikey Boy says, I can get to the point where seriously desire their friendship, and it, according to one of my friends who I've obsessed over in the past, can get to a point where they might be creeped out. Yeah, so you want, like we were talking a while ago, you want to really pay attention to what's going on in their lives and how you want to kind of balance how much they're interacting with you with how much you're interacting with them. And if you're doing so much more, if you're following them or watching them or interacting, you're initiating messages a lot more than they are, then there's not balance there. In a balanced relationship, there's going to be back and forth from both sides. So if you see that you're doing it a whole lot more, that's when to say to yourself, you have to intentionally choose another behavior. That can be hard, but it's intentional and purposeful. Thank you. That's an amazing point. Very positive the way I look at Cassandra. Okay, good. I get different reactions when I talk about Cassandra. So, it's not to deny that the struggle is there. It's definitely there. I just don't ever want people to get stuck as victims. We can be victimized by a situation, but we don't want to define ourselves as that. We don't want to define ourselves as a victim. We want to define ourselves as someone who is empowered and has power to change our lives. And we totally do. In any relationship, we have power to change our lives and our relationship to a degree. All right. Hi, LJ. Let me see if I've got any other questions over here. I think my other Facebook group just crashed, you guys. Okay. So LJ says, should someone with a late diagnosis at 44 years try to figure out how to navigate regular life, such as jobs and regular eating patterns, etc., before trying to work on a relationship with your partner? Well, not necessarily. I would say if these other issues are interfering, so if you're already in a relationship, so I'm not sure if you're already in a relationship or not, but I would say that you want to start looking at all of those things in your life through the new lens of being on the spectrum. So you have this new framework now. And so all areas of your life, start taking a pause and go and think, ask yourself, okay, now I know I'm on the spectrum. What does that mean about how I have how jobs, how I've been as an employee or as an employer even. What does that mean about how I've interacted with friendships and relationships? How does that change my perspective, my understanding of these things? And you don't have to do one at a time. You can look at all of those at, not at the exact same time, but you can you can consider things as they come up for you. Glenn says, I have a message with her on Facebook and she hasn't responded. Does it mean she wasn't interested with me? Most likely, when someone doesn't respond to you, whether it's on Facebook or a dating app, if they don't respond to you, it usually means they're not interested. So I would say move on and try to connect with someone who lives there in Washington near you so that you can meet them in person. Noir Turtle. These usernames crack me up, you guys. You said, my partner is resistant to giving verbal affection. He will say, I love you, but he won't ever want to tell me how much he likes me or romantic statements. He says he doesn't feel it. Okay, yeah, I was talking at the beginning of the live, if you were here, about how folks which it sounds to me like your partner is the one on the spectrum, or you think so anyway. So words, using words to communicate affection and love and value is not really the language of folks on the spectrum. Most people on the spectrum are more visual. So they think more in images or actions, but less in words. And the feeling, the feeling of love is something that can be very confusing for folks on the spectrum. If you think about it, I've talked about this before. Feelings, those of us who are neurotypical, we use the word feeling and emotion interchangeably. So emotions are about how we feel. And how we feel is an internal sensation in our body. We literally feel fear in our body. Our throat closes up or our heart starts pounding. The feeling of love is like this warm fuzzy. It's hard to really describe it, but it feels pleasant inside our body. Folks on the spectrum are not as in touch with internal sensations in their body. They don't literally feel. So sometimes they don't even feel things like hot or cold, or they don't when their body is hot or cold, or when they're tired, or when they're hungry or full. These are cues, feedback mechanisms that our body gives us. And folks on the spectrum, those feedback mechanisms don't actually work as well. So the emotion of love that neurotypicals feel, that's that warm connection, is not something that a lot of folks on the spectrum can relate to because they don't literally feel it. And so to say I love you is it comes down to definitions. You might want to ask your partner, what does it mean when you do say I love you? Or what does love mean to you? And what is it who am I to you? How do you define our relationship? And, why do you want me in your life? What would it be like if I wasn't? And be prepared for that question, because some folks on the spectrum are going to say, I just get on with life. And neurotypical partners can get really hurt by that. Oh my gosh, he wouldn't be devastated to not have me. But that doesn't mean that they won't be really, it would be really hard to not have you in their life. But they're just quite literally saying, well, I'd have to move on with life. That's what we do. It's a different way of communicating, a different way of using language. So start talking about those definitions and asking, what does this word mean to you? Let me tell you what it means to me. That's what my communication program does. It breaks all of that down. Nathan says, I've been taught that love is a choice. Sometimes you're not just feeling it, but love is a commitment. But you feel it often. Well, to love someone, it can be a choice. It can be a choice and a feeling. To be in a relationship with someone, that's part of love. Love is multifaceted. That's the problem, Nathan. It's not just any one thing. You can love a child that you're not choosing to be in a relationship with because they were born to you, or you can love a parent because you were born to them. Love as an action is a choice. When we actually take action to show someone that we care, That is a form of love. A form of love can also be that feeling too, that the emotion that is associated with loving someone. Uh, there are lots of different um, aspects to love. It's not just one thing. So it's hard to break it down just into those things. All right, Wendy says when my husband says, but I don't see the rest of it. Let's see. Yep, Facebook went rogue. Let me close that out while I'm waiting on Wendy. Okay, so Wendy says when my husband says I love you, he means to reaffirm his commitment to me in our relationship. Okay, right. So you have had that conversation with him. You know, what does love mean? And so for him, he's basically saying, I'm still committed to you. I still choose to be here. I'm still committed to you. And it's not necessarily an emotion. For some people, it's an emotion. For some people, it's that commitment. Some people, it means I care. Some people, it means I want you to be happy. I want I want to contribute to your well-being. It has different meanings for everybody. All right, you guys, I'm going to call it a day. Thank you for joining me today. Um, be sure and grab a spot in our group coaching on Thursday if you aren't already a member. The link is here in the feed. And also, like I said before at the beginning, I've got a few appointments open for relationship evaluations and autism assessments on my calendar. So that link, I think I dropped that link in here too. I can't remember if I did. You know what? I don't think I did. Here it is. So if you're interested in an autism screening or a relationship evaluation, here's the link to those. All right, you guys, I should be here back again next week. I missed the last 2 weeks because I was on vacay. It was great. I went to the beach. But I should be back here next week. So mark your calendars, and I will talk to you then. Muchas gracias. I think de nada is what I say in Spanish. All right, talk to you guys in a week. Bye.